What was the first time you can think of that your ADHD really had a negative impact on your life?
Looking back, I would say actually the impact was beginning to be felt probably in fourth grade, that early. I joke about it, but people with ADHD frequently hit a wall somewhere. Oftentimes it's college. Mine was actually in fourth grade. That's when life got a lot tougher. A variety of reasons for that. I went to a school that was way ahead of the school I was at before, and I didn't have the same kind of support, and I was still the same person that wasn't functioning as well. But I had no idea it was ADHD at that time.
What was it what happened in the fourth grade? Was it anything specific or
Just that's when school ratchets up. They expect you to do homework and actually turn it in on your own and all those things. So there was a lot of that. It's the gap between third and fourth grade in most schools is a little bigger than say from second to third or from fourth to fifth. There are these jumps that we take, kind of quantum jumps where we move from one circle to the next. And third and fourth grade is that for a lot of people. I've spoken to a lot of people with ADHD, and it seems to be a pretty common point.
when was the first time that you can remember that it had a significant impact on your finances?
I can't remember when it didn't. I think that might be the best way to put it. Again, I was unaware. I didn't know what the problems were, but my financial life has always been somewhat of a roller coaster. I would find something I was really excited about, and I would do it, and I'd make some money at it, and then I would maybe not manage that money very well, and then I'd get bored with whatever it was that I was doing, or it would get more difficult, mentally tedious, and I would stop doing that, and then there would be a drop in my income. But I had, like a lot of people, I'd let my expenses ramp up. So, that became a cyclical roller coaster kind of thing. And those swings, like for a lot of people, get bigger and bigger and bigger until there's a crisis at some point.
Does your ADHD still have a negative impact on your finances?
Absolutely. It also has a positive impact. And I'm going to take a little bit of a tangent because I think part of ADHD remediation is to be completely authentic. The problems we have happen in darkness, they happen in shame and that. So the best disinfectant is sunlight. It's pretty much a cliche that's accurate. So I think learning to be okay with talking about the pluses and the minuses is a really good thing. And it's a good thing for the people around us too, if you're working with people, because people don't wear the negative aspects on their sleeve and probably shouldn't, but if they're invisible, then someone else is walking around thinking they're the only one with that problem. When in actual fact, when we start talking about money, 70% of the people, ADHD or not, have got significant financial stress in their lives. 70%. So if you're in a room of 10 people, 7 of those people on average have got stress, and yet I can almost guarantee not one of them will show it.
Yeah.
They'll do their best not to show it at least.
Yeah, and the energy that they expend trying not to show it is energy taken away from dealing with it.
And that's probably one of the biggest reasons why being authentic works so well, because you're no longer expending energy to cover up, to have this shame in the background, whatever it is that's taking half of your mental and emotional bandwidth.
What do you do to manage your ADD? Sorry, to manage your finances better with having ADHD?
I would say there's a lot of things, but being more aware, more conscious, more kind of paying attention to things. I think that's one of the biggest problems that we have. We do things impulsively. Lots of times I'll want to do something and I'll just say to myself, let's think about that for a minute. And just in that little pause, that little moment, I kind of bring my rational brain to bear on the problem, and it works out better because we are very impulsive. Impulsivity is not doing things quick. That's fine. Doing things quick is an ADHD strength, in my opinion. But impulsivity is a little bit like a reflex. It doesn't make it to the conscious brain. You see, you do. You see, you do. You see, you do, and that gets us into trouble. So if you can see, activate your conscious brain, and then do, things work out a lot better. And it sounds so simple, and it is, but it's hard to build that habit of doing it.
So I've heard you talk before about the ADHD tax, the extra cost of living that people with ADHD have that regular folks don't.
Yeah.
What is that exactly?
The ADHD tax? Well, some of us have probably paid enough library fines to put another wing on the library because we forget to take the books back and all that. We pay our taxes late. We pay penalties on those things. We're impulsive. We speed. We get a lot more speeding tickets. We pay more for insurance when we do that. Not only do we pay for the ticket, but we pay for the insurance. We have accidents. We have to pay the deductible on our insurance to fix the car, and we quit our jobs prematurely, and so then we have a lack of income for a while. People with ADHD spend a lot of money that just gets wasted, and it's, again, we talk about things that reverberate. If you have financial problems and now you've got another $600 speeding ticket to pay, that doesn't exactly help you out, right? So that's the ADHD tax in a way. And when you begin to manage that, when you put your bills on automatic, or if you schedule it so that you'll get them, write the check if you're still writing checks, when you start to manage that, now you're not paying a $34 overdraft fee at your bank, which people with ADHD pay a lot of. When you stop paying those things, it may be that the income you have is actually sufficient to make it work. But if you're paying, $200 to $800 a month in ADHD tax money, which is very conservative, I would imagine, especially if you throw in income tax penalties and things like that. Because I have no idea what the stats are, but a huge number of people with ADHD don't do their taxes on time. And then they don't actually do them until they start getting a lot of nasty mail from the IRS. And by that time, they're worse than the mafia. By the time they add all those penalties on there, it's huge. So the ADHD tax is very real. If for no other reason in your life, maybe you're happy with the way things are going, you've got great friends and all that kind of stuff. If no other reason to manage it is to get rid of all that wasted money that you're putting out there.
Yeah, so for people with ADHD, it's a little bit of like silver lining, but for people with ADHD, there's one thing that they can do that most people don't have as an option to just improve their financial position, which is stop paying that tax, stop wasting money that you don't need to waste by putting some systems in place.
Yeah, I would call that plugging the leaks. Everybody has rent to pay or mortgages to pay. We all have certain things that we have to pay, groceries and all that. But we don't have to be paying late fees and all these other things that we end up paying. And that doesn't take a whole lot of consciousness to drop that number way down. And that's just found money. You don't have to ask your boss for a raise. It's just found money.
Yeah, you don't have to get a second job. You don't have to scramble in any way. And in addition to the financial benefit, you're building good habits for the rest of your life.
Well, you feel better. You talk about internal self-talk, and we beat ourselves up because, oh, I paid another one of those. Why do I keep doing that? And so we're kind of always either in a downhill spiral or an uphill spiral. We're always moving one direction or the other. I don't think we're in equilibrium very much. It seems like things are either getting better in our lives or they're getting worse. And so I'd rather have them getting better. And that takes just a little bit of consciousness to do that.
You mentioned earlier that the ADHD has hurt you financially, but it's also helped you financially.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some of the ways that it's improved your financial position?
I think with ADHD, we're almost forced to see a much wider picture. We're forced to find other ways to do things. We're forced to be creative. We're forced to be resilient. And I think at some point, those things begin to add up in our lives and they become a strength. And let me phrase this kind of in the negative. A person that has ADHD will never go to work in a job that's dull and boring and tedious and stay there for the entire 40 years even though they don't like it just because they get a paycheck. They'll get fired or they'll quit. It won't work. So the person with ADHD is almost forced to find a better path for themselves. And I think that's a plus. That's a blessing because I wouldn't want to wake up when I was 65, I'm already 67, but I wouldn't want to wake up at 65 and realize that I spent 40 years of my life, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, doing something that had no meaning in my life at all. And people with ADHD can't do that. So it's a blessing because then that path is precluded from them. People who are more conscientious, more detailed, and more disciplined, they're able to do that. But is that the right thing for their life? I don't think so.
Yeah, it seems like the ADHD folks, there's no middle ground. Either they crash and burn or they excel. So ADHD, if you can figure out a way to not crash and burn, you're going to excel. You're going to do well.
And I think that's correct. There probably is a middle ground. I don't know if that's an illusion or not, but the people that I see, usually they're crashing and burning. That's how I meet them. They come to our support clinics and that sort of thing. And then they, at some point, are able to either go down, they usually go down the victim route. You know, I have a deficit, I have a disorder, I'm kind of broken. This is a lifelong, across a lifespan problem, and I'll never get better. If I work really hard, I could be almost as good as other people. They're on that victim side. But the ones that switch over and say, no, I'm in control of my life, I can make these decisions, I have a hand that was dealt to me, and I can take advantage of my strengths and mitigate the weaknesses, those people can be extremely successful.
Sure, we've seen that with, I mean, it's the American success story in a lot of ways. It's an ADHD person who figured it out and excelled.
Right.
Who, you know, historically and even in modern culture, there are a lot of people with ADHD.
Sure.
Who do you admire?
Oh, that has ADHD? You know, I don't actually know that I think it that way. I do know there's quite a few famous people who are well known for having ADHD and being successful. I think I admire the people that I see every day that are moving away from this victim mentality, which is hard to get away from because that's what's studied. Okay, and there's nothing wrong with those studies except that they don't show the bigger picture. The people that are moving away from that to being in control and saying, you know, this is a hand of cards I was dealt, I'm going to play them better than I've been playing them before. I admire people that make progress.
The people that you've seen, these people that we're talking about, what are some of the things that they do? Do you see some common threads in these success stories?
Yeah, and actually I was meeting with someone yesterday and I asked this question. I realized I ask it all the time. What is the difference between the person who stays on the victim side? And we're all there, we flip back and forth, right? Things get hard and we go down that path. But what is the difference between that person who stays there and the person who kind of flips over and say, you know, yeah, my life's a mess and it's up to me, I'm going to do something about it, and they actually do over a period of time do something about it. I don't know exactly what that difference is, but it definitely has to do with awareness and this sense of, you know, my life is my life, right? I'm not some victim that's in a stream going downstream and, you know, just being carried with the water. I can choose to swim if I want to. So I think, I don't know where it comes from, but something inside of a person that says, I'm going to take control. I'm going to do something about this.
Sort of
that's the difference.
Taking agency in their own life.
Mm-hmm.
You've talked about some of the, you know, the impact that your ADHD has had on your finances, and by extension, I assume that impacts a lot of other aspects of your life. What, for you personally, or just in general, what's the chain of ADHD, then this, then that, then that? What's the ripple effect there?
You have a gift for understatement. Because finances impact everything else in our life. And it's not just a set of dominoes, it just spreads out, infects everything. And it reverberates, right? If your ADHD causes some difficulties and now you have financial problems, all of a sudden, guess what? Your ADHD is going to get worse because you're under financial stress. And nothing makes ADHD worse than being under significant stress, especially chronic stress. And financial stress is usually chronic. It can be acute if you have some, you know, you get sued, you have a huge medical bill, and maybe that's something that you work your way through in 6 months. But for most people, it's over the course of their life, and to turn that ship takes a significant amount of time. It is like a set of dominoes in some way, and when one of those dominoes doesn't work correctly, it does impact the rest of the series, for sure. And frequently, for me in my life, I could trace it back to an impulsive, I don't know if I'd call it exactly ADHD, but an impulsive decision, or more likely an unwillingness or an inability to reevaluate a decision that wasn't as good. That's one thing I would say I do much better now. You know, I believe a lot of people get tied up with not making decisions, and then you got like 15 things up in the air and you're really all tied up with that. It's using your bandwidth. So I have a mantra to myself, it's more decisions faster, right? Because I know that most decisions, if I'm wrong, I can correct, and I can, you know, the big decisions I'll take more time on, but small ones, I just decide right then. When we have this like blink mentality, and I just decide, and most of the time it's right. It's true for most people. It gets it out of my head. So I think that's a big part of it, is to do that. But what I think I've kind of learned or conditioned myself to do is to not just make a decision and leave it alone and forget about it, is to make that decision and then to revisit and reevaluate, was that the right thing? Do I still want to go down that path? So there's a lot of rethinking of things that I didn't used to do.
And that goes to what you were saying earlier about mindfulness being one of those sort of common threads that you see with people who have gone from the victim to the hero of their own story, kind of thing, is that self-awareness.
Right. And whether we understand it or not, we are the common denominator in our life. So if things aren't working, rather than looking out there for why things aren't working, I think we look in here. And besides, you can't affect what's out there. You can affect what's in here. And since what's in here is probably the cause of what's going on for the most part, and this is the only thing you can affect, it makes no sense to be looking out there. But if you're in a victim mindset, you say, well, it's out there somewhere. I have this deficit. I have this disorder. I'm broke. I'm bankrupt. I've got people suing me. Whatever happens to be coming in from the outside, we use those as excuses for why our life's a mess.
Sure. This happened to me, not
right.
I did this.
Right. But just a tiny little bit of introspection, and you realize you're the common denominator. This all happened as a series of things that came from your decisions.
One of the things I want to talk a little bit, just because I know working with you and Rena-Fi, that a big part of the focus of Rena-Fi's approach to financial literacy education is at least equal parts to the skill sets is the behavioral aspect of the psychological aspect of why we do what we do, and how important it is to change that, or all the skills in the world aren't gonna do any good. For people with ADHD who struggle financially, any ballpark of how much of that is the ADHD brain chemistry difference, and how much of that is learned behavior, learned helplessness, or a lack of learning skills when they're young? Any idea?
I don't know that I could parse it out as a percentage, but and to get more on this, you could look up Russell Barkley, because this is research that he had that I heard at a conference. Not exactly anatomically correct, but the back part of the brain is responsible for knowledge and skills. And that's not on the ADHD spectrum. People are smart or not, but that's nothing to do with ADHD, right? People with ADHD are on that bell curve somewhere. The front of the brain is executive function. It has to do with actually carrying things out and getting them done. And that's the disconnect that people with ADHD have. And so Barkley would say we need to put in some scaffolding, like coaching and ADHD friendly friends and other accountability type things in order to make those things happen. So I think to say it's the ADHD and just the impulsivity and all those things add in. But at least in my life, it's been that disconnect between the knowledge and skill that I have. That's why we interview so well. We go to an interview and we really impress the heck out of whoever we're talking to, and we almost always get that job, right? But then when it comes to actually doing the job, we don't do very well, right? At least not for very long. So in my life, where ADHD has impacted me the most is that gap between my knowledge and skills, which I think is up here, and my ability to actually do the work, which is way down here.
And I think that's where a lot of people with ADHD, they beat themselves up, where a lot of the sort of profoundly negative self-talk comes from is, I know I can do it, why don't I do it?
Exactly. And that's where the inconsistency comes. You do it, your knowledge and skills here, you do it to that level, and then the next day you're down here, and another day you're up here, and other people on the outside say, well, we know you can do it, so you must be lazy or whatever, and you get all this pejorative stuff going on. So I think that we incorporate that as self-talk at some point. To me, the answer is not to beat myself up. I say, that's the hand of cards I was dealt, right? Maybe I am weak in executive function, but guess what? I'm pretty strong on the knowledge and skills. So I should be thankful for that. And I need to figure out how to bring that online. And I bring that online by delegating in some cases, by making sure I'm doing work that I'm passionate and excited about, that involves other people, whatever it is in my life that increases my executive function to the point where I get things done. It's good.
Even if you're outsourcing the executive function.
Exactly. But what I see is that a lot of people, they discount their knowledge and skill, let's say, and they beat themselves up over the lack of executive function. Well, what if it was the other way around, right? I mean, why not turn that around completely and say, you know what, yeah, that's unfortunate, but I'm really happy that I have these things. I'm blessed because of that. Now I need to work on this. Instead of saying, you know, that's useless because I'm so bad at this, and then they go down this victim route.
Yeah, we did that. ADHD or not, I think people tend to dismiss their strengths and just focus on their weaknesses. So,
well, and they think that's responsible for where they are. There's a component of what they're strong at that is also responsible for where they are. They could be lower than they are right now. People in crisis could be worse off if they didn't have certain skills. So why don't they focus on that? I could be worse, and I'm doing pretty good for what I have now. I need to figure out how to mitigate these weaknesses of mine.
We talked about, I talked about outsourcing executive function. You talked about delegating, but that seems like a luxury to people who don't have any money.
Certainly.
So what sorts of things can someone do who maybe desperately needs to delegate some stuff, but doesn't have anyone to delegate to? Do you have any advice there?
Absolutely. And I think that is absolutely true, that we, when we're in crisis, it's frequently a financial crisis. You can't just go out and hire someone to, even if you had the money, if you hired them, if you don't know how to do it yourself, it's probably going to fail anyway. You have to actually walk through some of these things, even if you don't have to do it forever. You have to walk through it enough to know how to tell someone else how to do those things.
So if you don't have any money, what sorts of things can you do?
So here's one strategy and tactic that I have used, and it's worked really, really well for me. And I still do it. It doesn't matter whether I have money or not. I still do it. I've kind of realized that I tend to do what I like to do, and I'm very easily distracted into something that I'd rather be doing if I have something stressful and tedious and dull, and I don't really want to do this report, for example. Very easy to get sidetracked off. So what I've had to do, and I shouldn't say had to do, I think it's worked really well, is I've kind of compartmentalized my life to where in the evening I do my planning for the next day, and there's a reason for that. I'm emotionally far away from those things, so I'll put down what really needs to be done. I won't avoid something because, it's not time to avoid it yet. It's not right in front of me. So in the evening, I'm what I would consider the CEO of my life, right? My job is to strategize, to plan, to decide what is going to be done the next day. And then the next day, I'm not the CEO. I don't allow myself to make those kind of decisions. I'm now the worker bee of my life. My CEO last night said, here's my list of things to do. Here's my itinerary. Here's my schedule of people I have to talk to. Whether I like it or not, that's my job. Because everywhere I've worked, people have loved me as an employee, right? It's when I got out on my own that I started to fail because I didn't have this structure around me, the scaffolding that Russell Barkley would talk about. So that was like a self-imposed scaffolding. I said, I'm the CEO. Nope, I'm not the CEO today. This morning, I'm going to do this work. Whether I like it or not, this is what my CEO said to do. It's my job. And of course, I can write a note to myself and say, tonight, I'm going to talk to the CEO about that. I don't think that should be done. But today, I don't have the right to make that decision. And I know myself, it'll be an emotional decision rather than a rational decision if I do. Very easy for me to rationalize not doing something. And when later on I get away from it, I said, you just didn't want to do it. That's what it really came down to, even though you came up with all kinds of reasons not to do it. So as a strategy that costs absolutely nothing, spend a half hour every night planning your next day. And then the next day, 100% zero tolerance for failure. Just do what you planned on doing. That right there makes a tremendous amount of difference.
So it sounds like instead of outsourcing something, which sounds very appealing, like I don't have to deal with this, I'm giving to somebody else, you're just sort of going a little split personality and saying, in the evening, rational, that's the rational boss. And in the morning and afternoon, that's the worker bee, the drone mentality.
Just do what's on the plate. And as part of that, it depends on your position and what kind of work you have and stuff, but I was able to say, I'm just going to plan for 4 hours worth of work. Now, the phone would ring, emails would come in, I would do more than 4 hours, but my plan would call for 4 hours worth of expected work to be done. And then even if it took till midnight, I would get that 4 hours done. And that's a big part of it too, is to hold yourself to a tight zero tolerance thing on what you yourself said you wanted to do. Because you got to get to the point where you can look in the mirror and say, I'm a person who gets things done. Because until you can do that, then you say, yeah, I planned it, but I'm probably not going to do it. And you don't have any force going forward. But if you do everything you said every day for a month or two, you start to say, geez, I can make a commitment to myself and I can keep it. And I think those are very powerful internal things. And again, it costs nothing. You have no excuse. That, in my life also, I've tried to kick the excuses out from under myself. They do not help us. They just take us off track and numb us out to the failures that we're having. So plan for 4 hours worth of solid work. Do it, whether if it takes 12 hours, just whatever it is, just get it done. And then come back the next day and rinse, wash, and repeat. Keep doing the same thing. And you begin to feel much more in control of your life.
A lot of people have a lifetime of being told that they don't get anything done. A lifetime of telling themselves,
Yep.
I'm a screw up, or I'm not going to get it done anyway, so why even think about it?
Right.
But compartmentalizing might take care of a lot of that, and so that has to do with productivity and that sort of thing. But I would imagine you can do the same sort of thing with paying your bills and all that sort of thing.
Right. So one more thing then, it would be routines. People think, I don't know where this stuff comes from. People just make it up. They say, okay, it takes 30 days to create a habit, or 7 days, or whatever. It's nonsense. If you want to start paying your bills or taking your medication or whatever it is, and that's one particular habit you want to install, tie it to another habit that you have solidly down already. If you do that, it takes like no time to create a habit. And if you don't do that, if that habit stands alone in your life, like going to the gym and you're just doing it every day for 6 months and you don't do it one day, that habit's just gone. It will disappear no matter how many times you do it, unless you build it into a routine of other things.